What's up, guys? This is Ryan from UpswingPoker.com, and today in this video we're going to be introducing the newest member of the Upswing Poker team, Freed Meulders, aka My Name is Carl. You'll know Freed from the 2-5 Zoom games on PokerStars. Playing some of the toughest mid and high stakes games online. Definitely a cash game specialist. That's what we brought him on for. I know a lot of you guys, obviously play a lot of cash games, play a lot of Ring No Limit, so sort of without further ado, Freed, welcome to the team.
What's up, guys? Thanks.
So let's start. Well, let me start off with a little bit about sort of, I guess, our process for selecting Freed. So, as you guys know, up until this point, especially specifically in the lab, Doug and I have done all the content, and the reason, sort of the philosophy behind that, is that we wanted everything to be under one umbrella, from pros that you understand, know, and trust, and have it be a sort of a comprehensive strategy that works together. So there's sort of not conflicting information, and it's all pretty good stuff. And I would say so far it's gone pretty well. But we also wanted to branch out and get a variety of opinions, especially opinions that we respected. And Freed, I don't know what it was like from your perspective, but from our perspective, we reached out to a lot of different players. We had guys on our radar, for who we wanted to make content, and we were pretty picky, right? Like we wanted somebody that was a good player, who had a not just a good win rate, but a good head on their shoulders, could solve problems, and more importantly could then had that sort of regimented analytical approach that could then be shared. So yeah, we looked through a lot, and we were very picky. We hold all of our content to a very high standard, and then we found Freed. And I got to tell you guys, I'm sure most of you probably don't know him, but one of the funny things that I'm sort of like very well qualified for is vetting poker coaches. Like it's like weird. You'd never think that you would sort of have, like, that would be a skill that you would have or use, but after like seeing everybody, I'm like, oh no, I wish you would do this a little bit differently, or like, oh, this would be a more interesting way to tackle this sort of thing. And when I saw your video, I was like, oh my god, this is this is amazing, this is perfect. And yeah, I really liked it. So why don't you start off, and why don't you give the lab members a chance to get to know you, and tell them a little bit about yourself and your poker story.
Okay, so first of all, I gotta thank you for that very flattering introduction. And yeah, about me, I've been playing poker professionally for a couple of years now. Well, many years actually. I think I officially started in 2012. Mostly playing mid to high stakes on PokerStars. And yeah, I'm just playing Zoom all the time, I guess, since I just like the ease of starting and stopping a session whenever I want to, a lot. So yeah, those are the games I've been playing for years now, and my approach is pretty much gonna be game theory optimal based, which means I'll try to look for like the GTO solutions of certain spots, and then decide what to do. Like I want to start off with a good base strategy and then make some exploitable adjustments. So yeah, that's about it, I guess.
So how did you find poker? How did you get into poker, like, initially?
Well, I used to play Magic the Gathering. I don't know how well known that game actually is.
That's a pretty popular game. I used to play a little Magic back in the day.
So yeah, I'm one of those guys who started with that game, and I think it's like a good starting point to switch to poker, since it's also a game with imperfect information, and you try to make the right decisions based on the information you got, and you got to focus on the decisions and not on the outcomes, because sometimes the outcome's gonna suck even when you made the right decision. So some Magic friends started playing poker When I was a student, I played some casual poker with friends, and then yeah, tried it out online, and yeah, started reading books, watching training sites, and yeah, kind of got the ball rolling that way.
Cool. Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because I remember, this isn't this way anymore, but years ago, when poker was sort of first on TV, the Magic players, I was a Magic player back then, and the Magic players always sort of got made fun of by the conventional pros, and like now like oh, Magic nerds, and like now they're all like broke and gone, and like the game is
Yeah,
pretty much overrun by Magic nerds. And I
it's
think
Revenge of the Nerds.
yeah, Revenge of Nerds is here in poker. And I think the other funny thing is that I think it's like that's who like I would want to learn from. Like that's who. Yeah, I don't want like some like loudmouth on TV who just like does like clicks button. I want to learn like to the guy that's been thinking about these things for a couple years. So that's I view that as for sure as a positive. So what would you say? So your approach now, very sort of like regimented and theory, sort of like analytical oriented. When would you say did you start when you started playing poker? Was that your approach, or like was there at some point a turning point, and then you're like, oh my god, like this is how I want to approach the game, and then you started focusing down that route?
Think when I started out, most of my like I had a couple of poker playing friends who were way better than me, but they were going for the full exploitable approach, and yeah, so when I started out, I tried to do it like that, but I felt like it fit them more than it fitted me. And now, like the last couple of years, there's been a rise of good software or tools to analyze certain spots and look for the GTO solutions. So I'm kind of happy with that evolution, since that's more how I like to play poker. I like to solve the theoretical, see it as a game that can be solved, or we can try to solve eventually. But most of my friends who were the good exploitable players, they're having less fun nowadays. Now everybody's trying to
Yeah, they're too good.
go for the GTO moves. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that, yeah, that stuff like only works if like people are can be exploited. But if they're playing pretty solid, I think if you take an exploitative approach, all of those exploits will sort of quickly evaporate, and then you
Yeah.
just feel like, I don't know, like, I don't know what to do. Okay, well that's yeah, that's cool. It's very interesting. So now what I want to do is I want to, and by the way, like hearing you say that, like a ton of our lab members just got like they're real hype because we've, they've been like waiting for sort of more of that like deep hardcore, math and theory and solving stuff. So let me. So before we talk a little bit about that, I just want to go through real quick like what we've done in the lab so far. Just like give a recap because some people have been with us since the beginning, some people just got here, and you're obviously new to this whole thing. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to kick things off with pre-flop, and I just want to show you our range viewer, and I just want to talk a little bit about pre-flop. So okay, so this is our pre-flop range viewer, and it's I'm sure you have something similar, where it's like okay. So like this is like a button raise for a sin range where all the red hands are pretty much default raises. All the pink hands are sort of optional raises, based on, really just like who's left in the hand and like sort of what kind of strategy you're using, what kind of bet size you're executing. And it just sort of gives people, a little bit of that flexibility to play a little bit tighter, a little bit looser on the button or whatever position. Given the game sort of circumstances. So, real quick, can you just chat a little bit about your approach to RFI, sort of like how you do it and how you adjust?
Like most of my undergun, middle position, and cutoff ranges will be sort of fixed. And yeah, on the button and in the small blind, I'll have a look at who's left in the hand, who's in the big blind, and some people, they won't defend enough, so you can widen up the button opening range or the small blind opening range versus them, definitely.
Okay, Um, all right. So then the next range we have here is, or the next series of ranges. And by the way, if you look through this, it's built for full ring. I think there's something around 90 ranges here, so it's kind of like almost no matter what the preflop action. Um, you're sort of equipped to to have a range and know what to do pre. So here, let's just we're taking a look at a random range. It's like cutoff versus we raise first in the cutoff, and the small blind face gives us a 3-bet. So then this would be our range where red hands would be re-raises. Obviously here at the top, these red hands are for value. These suited aces would be bluffs. This sort of red-orange hand could go either way. You could maybe get tens in here, again, sort of depending upon the opponent. Pink hands are sort of these optional bluff hands that, again, are gonna. It's really, I think one of the problems with this is that depending upon, bet size, strategy, stack size, this range could be much different in one way or another. But let's say you need to work in some more bluffs. We throw in ace-10 offsuit, a few more suited connectors. The green hands are call, and then these blue hands they really could be bluff 4-bets. They could be calls with a smaller 3-bet size, or they could even be folds versus bigger 3-bet size. So when you think about playing versus a 3-bet, what is your, again, you can be very general here, you don't have to be specific. What is your general approach?
My general approach, well, it's a broad question, but when I look at this range, I'd say I would be flatting more of the suited aces that are like 4-bet here all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably, most of my 4-bet hands will be played as a 4-bet like part of the time and played as a flat part of the time. So I'd also use like some ace-6 suited or ace-2 suited as 4-bets, but like only 20% of the time, and would be flatting them mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And same for the other 4-betting hands, I guess. And I'll 4-bet a bit more when I think my opponent is folding too much against 4-bets, for example.
Sure, for sure. So how do you? So when let's say you wanted to mix a hand like ace-6 suited, for instance, how would you how would you even come to that determination? Where you're like, okay, this is a hand to mix, and then how would you determine? Oh, it's like 75 raise, 25 call, or like how do you even approach that, again, from a general sense?
Like, it's obviously I don't know all the frequencies by heart, so I try to have a general idea. I think most of the time, like if I want to 4-bet a certain combo, it will be like 20% of the time that I do it, and I actually will have a random number generator while playing, and so I'll spin the random number generator, and it's gonna be a number from 1 to 100, and 100 is gonna be the most aggressive action, and 1 is gonna be the most passive action. Right. So I'll spin it, and if it's 80 plus, I'll 4-bet the ace-6 suited.
And then if it's 1 through 79, you're like, okay, this is the time to call ace-6 suited.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there will still be some biases or exploitable things about my game, but at least it's gonna be mixed up some of the time. And
for sure,
I still try to keep getting better and be better at knowing the frequencies. But like I say, knowing, but obviously like poker is not solved, so it's just an estimate of what I think is best at the time.
Right.
My view on the 4-betting ranges might evolve over time also.
Yeah, and by the way, just to be clear, really tell I guess with you and all the members have been watching this. So the ranges that we have created here are pretty static. There's like a little bit of flexibility, but like what we don't have is splitting, right? So for instance, we don't have like ace-6 suited is 20% of the time it's going to be 4-bets, 80% is going to be a call, something like that, because the lab is really built for it to be, it's supposed to be like very robust in that you kind of can't mess it up. It's like it takes, we really wanted to just get what anybody was doing and just sort of get them on like sort of our track, and just be playing like sort of in this ballpark, so that like at least then they're sort of doing roughly the things that we want them to do. And then we can we sort of like build from there, and like so that was sort of like the thesis for the lab. And So I just want to say there's nothing like fundamentally wrong with these ranges, but you can take it to deeper levels of precision, and then yeah, it's like so it's not so obvious what's in your range, whether it comes to raise or call, and it also helps a little bit for balancing if like sometimes to get sort of the perfect number of combos
Yeah.
in each range. All right, so now if we'll go down to verse RFI, let's say hijack versus the button, and actually let's do hijack versus cutoff. There's just like too much going on here. Okay, hijack versus cutoff. So here, same thing. Red hands are generally going to be re-raises. Pink hands are kind of optional, but I mean honestly, a couple of these given smaller bet size could even be call. Green call. Light green is fours call or fold, and the red orange is re-raise or call. And again, so we had a little bit of subjectivity in here. We give everyone a little bit of flexibility of what they want to do. I guess and I think the button's sort of the most interesting, but I think button and cutoff can be pretty interesting. Generally, how are you approaching, deciding what hands to put in 3-bet and then call ranges?
Again, like most of my 3-betting hands they'll also be profitable calls. But
so then how do you determine how to make the most money, or what's the most profitable action?
Yeah, it's hard to say actually.
It's
pre-flop is still
tricky.
Unexplored. Well, no, not unexplored territory, but like there's room for improvements. But I'd say a big difference is that in the cutoff, I would be 3-betting more hands than I would be flatting. While on the button, since I will have position in the hands, I'll be more inclined to flat some hands that I use in my 3-betting range in the cutoff, like the suited connectors, like the lower ones. I'd never be flatting them as a cutoff, while I would be flatting them some of the time as a button. So I think those are the biggest differences, that I can get away with more flats on the button since I'll have position in the hand.
And how sensitive are you towards bet sizing, towards pre-flop raise sizing? Like if you're on the cutoff and you face a min raise, let's say a hijack min raise versus a hijack 2.5x, what would be your difference in strategy there?
Yeah, again, there's gonna be some changes, but like it's not fixed, I guess. Like I'd be versus a smaller raise, you get better odds on your call, so you might be more inclined to call. But when you're in the cutoff, you have to think about the button being behind you and you possibly not having position in the hand. So I'd still be 3-betting a lot instead of flatting. While on the button, there would be a bigger difference. Versus the min raise, you can flat like King 9 or Jack 9 suited easier. While I would never flat those.
What about weaker offsuit broadways like Jack 10, Queen Jack, King Jack offsuit?
I know some people flat those on the button, but I'd never do it. Like it's probably a very marginal spot, and it's hard to say if you can get away with it. You could say that against like a more recreational type player, you would be wanting to play those hands against them, but then I'd rather 3-bet them and isolate the bad player instead of seeing a multi-way flop with a offsuit Broadway hand.
Yeah, because it sucks by calling you a lot. I mean, you definitely allow the big blind to call a lot of hands. But I mean, really, you allow both players just like a lot more optionality. Whereas if you 3-bet, they're in a tough spot. They're in a tricky spot. All right, so now let's just sort of cruise through these the modules here. I think you guys can see all these. All right, so the latest module, the May module, mastering database software. And so I just want to give you, I mean, really everybody, but like, definitely specifically you, a little idea of what we've done here. So in the mastering database software, I think there's something like 40 filters, and there's a series of like poker tracker stats and win rates where you can then like filter and compare what you're doing versus either what I'm doing, or I had like this big, database of like winning players, like what they're doing, to just get like an idea of like, how you're doing, how are you doing versus 3-bet, how are you doing when you 3-bet, how are you doing, what's your RFI game look like, so that people, can sort of use their own databases, go through all these filters, and then it lets them sort of pinpoint, where they might be leaking. WSOP tune-up is Doug just gave, like, I think he just fielded a bunch of questions from the lab group. It's really just a tournament module. If you guys just want to learn about tournaments, it's all good stuff in there. 4-bet pots is like literally exactly what it sounds like. We go through a bunch of my hands, and we go through 4-bet ranges, and then the hands that I played in my 50NL 10,000 hand sample breakdown. And you just really get, you just look at 4-bet pot, 4-bet pot, 4-bet pot. And I think it's easier when you see them all in a row, all at once, because 4-bet pots happen so infrequently that I think it's definitely, for me, for a long time, they were really tricky. And then once I started, playing a lot more and started looking at them in a database, trying to look at them all, in sequence, I think it was easier to sort of filter out the noise and see what was really going on. Now there's a plain explain section, and at some point soon we're gonna have a nice piece of artwork with Reed's face on it, and his plain explain is going to be in here. I'm really looking forward to that. I've already watched the first one; it's excellent. So this foundation stuff is really introductory stuff. It's just getting people, introduced to, like terminology and like, what a range is, and sort of all the stuff that we're going to be using in the rest of the lab. And the most interesting thing about this thing is something called the 4 categories. I'm sure if you guys have had the post-flop engine or the post-flop game plan, you're familiar with, and it's really just about hand ranking. And this is going to be quite contrarian to, I think, what like the way that you'll play, but maybe not too much. So the gist of it is this: to keep things sort of simple. If you bet a street with a value bet, the idea is that you bet all subsequent streets with that value bet as well, and that you pick bluffs that function well as 3, I'd say on the flop as a 3-barrel bluff, on the turn as a 2-barrel bluff, and on the river as a good hand to just sort of check down, and then if you get the opportunity, turn it into a bluff on the river. So if we look at this example down here, Queen 10-3 rainbow flop. So, category 1 hand would be a set of 10s or a really strong queen, the strongest queen. A category 2 hand would be a middle queen, or sort of this middle 10. A category 3 hand on this board, could be either of these straight draws, King 9, Jack 8. All those would be, pretty. They sort of have decent removal effect and can make a strong hand that can value bet 3 times. And then an example of a category 4 hand would be something like Ace 5 or 6 7. Something that really doesn't have anything going on, but can still win the pot and can balance out with these category 2 hands where, you might be checking back, and then, if they check twice to you, like, okay, I'm going to value bet my queen jack, or I'm going to turn my 7-6 into a bluff. So that's, and like in essence, in a nutshell, that is the framework for how we play post flop. We sort of like rank our hands, put them in separate categories, and go from there. And I imagine that's a little bit different from the way that you approach post flop. So I guess give me first, your thoughts on this approach, and then what you do differently, or how you approach things.
Well, I have to start by saying, like, this approach makes sense. This is definitely how I learned how to play when I started out. But yeah, an important change for me would be that I'd be putting hands of all kinds of categories in like different lines, different parts of the game tree. Mm-hmm. Meaning that, like in this situation, we have a hijack open and a button call. Mm-hmm. I'd like to be able to check some stronger hands. So that would be even the category 1 hands. When I check on this board, like I could check a set of 10s like a certain amount of the time. So when the button bets, when I check to him, I will still be able to have strong hands. And yeah, I can check raise those 10s, or I can check call them and check raise them on the turn, or like I try to have all kinds of hands in all kinds of possible lines. Because when you look at some of the GTO solutions, you'll see that many hands are kind of indifferent between which lines you take with them, meaning that, like, you could say with a category 1 hand, you want to get in 3 streets of value, but you can get those 3 streets in different ways. Like, let's say with a flop check raise or a turn check raise. So I think in the end it balances out, and you can get those 3 streets of value in a different way than betting 3 times yourself.
Right.
So yeah, that will be the biggest difference. But again, it's obviously very hard to know how to split up your ranges in all these spots all of the time. So it's more, I think I try to have a general sense of the frequencies with which I want to be betting a board. And yeah, then it's just me trying to mix it up, but it's not going to be perfect poker either.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And you know, I would say that, again, sort of like the core, the essence of the lab strategy, which is like if you just use these ranges and then rank your hands and sort of play them accordingly, like I don't know where the hell you're at before doing this, but like if you just start doing this, you're gonna be like sort of in the ballpark, right? Like there's gonna be like, you know, places for guys like me or Fried or Doug to exploit you, but you know you're gonna be doing a much better job, sort of than your average player. And you know, sort of as you're talking about that, I wrote 2 things down, and yeah, the first thing is that, you know, you're right, is that if it's valuable to be able to have, because like all the hands are sort of in these categories at all times, but what the lab has done is corresponded a category to an action, whereas to make it, you know, to add another layer of complexity or sophistication, you would sort of put all the categories in all of the different actions, so that you sort of your action is sort of giving away less about your hand, and there's less you know, that we can do to capitalize on that. You know, for instance, using the lab strategy on Queen 10-3 Rainbow, if let's say what was the action here? So we raise first in the hijack, I call on the button. If I have King Queen, I effectively have pocket queens, or, you know, basically the nuts, because the strongest hand you could possibly have is Queen Jack, which allows me to do things like bet really big and just sort of, you know, rob your range from equity in the pot. So I can sort of on the one end, and on the other end, on, you know, certain boards, certain runouts, I can also bet very small to put a lot of pressure on your range and deny a lot of equity. So yeah, by having, you know, raising ranges and, you know, these other stronger hands, you know, it really, you know, when you look at it then from the other player's perspective, it limits their options if they're a good player, if they understand how the spot works and sort of how you're playing. You know, they don't have as many options to really put you in a tough spot.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is that, you know, like sometimes it gets a little bit sticky on certain boards, where like a Queen 9 board is like you know, like when you 3-bet and then somebody calls, just sort of comes to mind, where, you know, a king through like an 8 all change the board in really sort of this dramatic way, where they're all really good for the player that called, and for the most part not that great for the person that, let's say, 3-bet and bet the flop. So yeah, I think like same thing, sort of like having like a mix, more of a mix of hands in there, like in a spot like that, it doesn't make it so obvious, you know, like whether or not your range is sort of like weak or strong, or how, you know, your opponent in that spot should be playing against you. So, okay, cool. So yeah, so that's the essence of you know, that's sort of, I guess, the essence of the post-flop strat. These pre-flop modules, I think we just dig in and we do a little bit of math for the different spots, and sort of like how to, you know, how to think about the spots, and how to, you know, how to adjust. And then a lot of what we do is all sort of sitting here in post-flop, and we dig into the way that we decided to segregate the game initially was single raise pots as the pre-flop raiser, single raise pots as the pre-flop caller, and then 3-bet pots as the pre-flop raiser, and 3-bet pots as the pre-flop caller. And that was sort of the essence of, you know, how to think about the game, because, you know, we thought you couldn't really think about just the flop, because there's a pre-flop consideration there as well, right? Like pre-flop matters a lot. So, you know, all of those are structured based on pre-flop. And then we went through like a whole entire flush draw module. We talked very extensively about how to balance flush draws out, how to put them in different ranges. This how to play the river module. We did like a combo breakdown for I think like I want to say like 8 river spots where it was actually the flop turn and river, and we looked at how many combos were in each player's range, and then how to think about when you call, when you raise, when you fold. Introduction to being a gangster. So this is an interesting one. What you'll come to find is that we have a lot of these guys that play really tight at like a lot of the, let's say 5 NL to 100, 200 NL Zoom games on Stars play really nitty pre-flop because I think back in the it used to be that like recreational players everyone was just really loose because they couldn't distinguish the value between 5-4 off, Queen 7 off, Queen Jack suited, and like Ace King. Like they're all like, oh, they're 2 cards. Like, what does it matter what 2 cards they are, right? Yeah. So they would just play them because it's more fun that way. And so like then I think people sort of figured out, oh, if you just play play kind of tight, those players get rocked and you win money. And now I think it's kind of going the other way now, where playing looser in a very structured and sensible way, it can be very effective. So anyway, so what was happening is that we kept getting our members posting these graphs where they were just getting obliterated in Redline, and I don't see if I can get Poker Tracker because I actually want to show you. We haven't talked about this yet. So these stats that I wanted to show you real quick are the stats over here that are open face 3-bet and stole. So they're exactly what they sound like. Open face 3-bet is just when you raise first in in this instance early position, how often do you face a 3-bet after you raise? And then stole is just how often do you raise from a given position, and then just take down the blinds. Have you ever looked at something like this before?
No.
Okay, well, I mean, you're more than welcome to these stats. But yeah, so this sample I played was on ACR where the games are actually much looser. But a lot of the stole, you're like if you look at a high stakes game on Stars 5-10 or higher, you're gonna see like 30-30. You see like you're gonna basically face 30% 3-bet and a 30% stall from no matter where you raise. And what you're gonna see on a lot of the smaller stakes Stars games, especially Zoom games, is that they're stealing 40+% of the time and facing 20% or less 3-bets. Sort of natural adjustment to that would be to raise more, and also the 1-1 self flops are quite high. So the natural adjustment to that would be sort of like raise more, fight for more pots. But most of them aren't doing that, and also when I looked at a bunch of players' databases for the database module, one of the filters was, well, how much are you guys actually bluffing on the flop in the river? And like pretty much everyone was under bluffing by a decent amount. So that's definitely sort of like one thing to consider is making sure you work in your bluffs. And then just more sort of like I think really important topics to cover: multi-way pots, which I'm actually going to be really interested to. Hopefully, we'll do a little something on this at some point because I'll be interested to see your approach to the multi-way pots, taking more of a solver approach, 3-bet pots, and then overbetting would be really juicy as well. I'm sure that'll be really interesting.
I say multi-way pots, like the solvers don't work for multi-way spots. They only work for heads-up spots.
Oh no! So what do you do? What do you do in a multi-way spot? Just like wing it? Just like
like being really tight and clueless.
That was pretty much the gist of what we did. Then sort of down tournaments. This is obviously not going to be your area, but for guys checking this out, we have a whole host of tournament stuff. Some away from the table stuff, which this actually might be your area if you dig into some of the software. And then mental game, we got a Zen Doug and a very angry Mattisau, and it's just like, which one do you want to be? Anyway, so that's basically the lab, and that's basically freed. I think we're gonna upload this video and get you in the lab Facebook group pretty soon. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. If there's any specific content or module that you want free to dig into, let us know. We're still in the sort of formation process. He's making plan explains. We got to figure out, what's the best way to get him into making a module. We're happy to hear your feedback, and we're very happy to have you, Freed. Welcome. Do you have
Thanks.
Do Do you have any final sort of like words or anything you want to talk about?
Like not really. I start with some play and explains, and I'll just see what kind of feedback I get from the viewers or what kind of questions they have, so I can focus on some issues they might have, or like if they like something I do in my videos, I'll do it more often and things like that. So I'll try to adjust my content based on the feedback I'll be getting.
Cool.
So don't be shy.
Yeah. No, I think that's the way to do it. And I think it'll be good to get them to see you, because like it was funny. I had a friend hit me up today, and she was like, "Are there Play and Explain videos in the lab?" I'm like, "Yes, obviously there's Play and Explain videos in the lab." She's like, "Good, they're my favorite." So like I think there's a lot of people that don't just they just go right to the Play and Explains, and then if they like you, like, all right, I'll listen to you talk about river combos for an hour, fine. so yeah, it'll be a good way to get you in there. Anyway, we're gonna call this a video, and yeah, talk to you guys in the Facebook group.